Welcome back to another episode of Enter the Nerdom. I'm here with hosts
Stan Morrissey
and Watson Bradshaw.
And I'm Chad Cook. And we're here with our special guest,
Fred Dekker, who is the director and writer of Night of the Creeps, The Monster Squad, RoboCop 3, and the writer of The Predator, and has had an amazing career throughout Hollywood.
Basically anything that was cool when we were kids.
Huge influence in our lives, and we are here tonight talking to him. Hello, Fred. Thank you so much for coming on.
Great to be here.
Nerdom. And I think we'd all like to start off by just asking you how you got to the career that you've had, this amazing career you've had. How did, if you want to just give us a synopsis of your life, how you got into Hollywood, what pulled you into directing and writing, and how you got where you are now.
Well, I was always a movie buff. My dad was a movie buff, and back in the bygone days before streaming and even before video and whatnot, and DVDs and Blu-rays and all that newfangled crap. When I was a kid, I'd look at the TV listings, and I'd seen some of King Kong, the original King Kong from 1933, and I would look in the TV listings, and it would be on at 3 o'clock in the morning. So I'd set my alarm clock, and I'd get up at 3 o'clock in the morning and go and watch King Kong, and that was kind of my childhood, absorbing these, cinefantastique movies with elements that were crazy and strange and had monsters and stuff like that. And as I grew up, I continued to go to the movies, and I was lucky. I grew up in the San Francisco Bay Area, and there were a lot of retrospective houses that would play old movies. And I discovered, the films Ray Harryhausen and that kind of stuff. And I was always a big fan of genre movies. But I think the one that sort of changed me for life was Jaws. I saw that when it first opened in the mid-'70s. And it was the first movie where, if you know who Ray Harryhausen is and Willis O'Brien, who did effects back in those other pictures that I mentioned, you knew that there was somebody sort of doing the visual effects by hand. But Jaws was the first movie where I sensed the director. And that may be my own ignorance, because a lot of movies have showy directing, but not so much back in the day. And that was the one where I could feel Steven Spielberg sort of playing the audience like a violin. And I just thought, boy, wow, that's so cool. I would love to be able to do that. And so that was kind of my inspiration to become a filmmaker. And I started making Super 8 films and shooting videos and whatnot when I was in junior high school and in high school, and I eventually decided that that's what I wanted to do with my life.
Wow. And how did you end up, Night of the Creeps was your first major film. What was the inspiration for that, and how did you get, basically how did you get it made? Because it was when you were starting off, right, as a filmmaker. So when your first major films, how did that come about?
Well, I went to UCLA to go to film school, but they rejected me. So I just went to UCLA anyway, because the girls were cute.
You just sit in the class; they can't tell you to leave, right?
Well, no, the weather was great and the girls were cute. I didn't go to film classes per se, although I did discover a lot of because they were constantly screening classics. I mean, that's where I discovered Sergio Leone. I saw The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly for the first time on the big screen at the film school there. But mostly, so I was an English major, technically. But I started writing screenplays as sort of an entree to break in. And there's a great, no longer with us, Irish author named Brian Moore. And I took an English class from him, a writing class. And I said, listen, I'm working on this screenplay. And it was kind of crappy. But I said, would you be willing to look at my screenplay? Because he had written some screenplays as well. I believe he wrote a Hitchcock movie, one of his last films. Brian Moore wrote. So I showed him the script, and he said, "This is kind of expert."
Wow.
And I thought that was pretty high praise from a very well-known novelist. So I started writing scripts, and I was also making short films at that time. And I made a short 16 millimeter film, which was about these two college kids who, one of them has a crush on this girl, and they try to figure out how to get with the girl, and time travel was involved. And I actually, with some friends of mine, started to cast the film and to actually put it on its feet and to make it as a 16 millimeter short film. And for some reason, so I filmed about 10 minutes of it, if that, maybe 7 minutes of it. And then I wrote this script, which became Night of the Creeps. And it was my attempt to sort of break in and do something that had a genre element to it. It's kind of, I call Creeps kind of a pastiche. It's like it's just, you know, everything you can think of you throw in. There's jokes, and there's zombies, and there's girls taking their clothes off, and like everything that you would want to see at a B movie at a drive-in theater. So I wrote that script. So I had this script and I had this short film, and somehow or other submitting those, I got an agent based on another script I had written, and so we submitted the film and the script to TriStar Pictures, and they said, go ahead, go make it.
Oh, wow.
Did you write the story for the House movie before working on Creeps?
House was my first screen credit. It was actually a short film idea. We had all seen the Twilight Zone movie in the mid '80s, and we all loved that. And George Miller and Joe Dante and these great directors in Spielberg making these great short films. And I said, let's do that. So I wrote House as a short film about a Vietnam veteran who is haunted by his experiences and is visited by his old army buddy who was, of course, killed in the war. And I never made that, but my friend Ethan Wiley, who was a roommate of mine at UCLA, said, "Hey, are you ever going to make that haunted house movie?" It was called House. He said, "You're going to make that movie?" And I said, I don't know, maybe. And he goes, "Well, can I take a crack at it?" So he wrote the script, and I was working for my first job in Hollywood was a Godzilla script before.
Oh yeah,
I did want to talk to you about that.
Before anybody thought to make Godzilla as a feature, English language feature. Steve Miner, who had made who was a producer on the Friday the 13th movies and directed the second and the third and many other films as a director, he hired me to write the Godzilla movie. And I did it, and it was never made, but he read the House script and he said, "Hey, I really like this. What are you doing with this?" And I said, "You're looking at it." And he said, "Well, can I make it?" I said, "Sure." So Steve Miner directed the movie.
Oh, wow.
And Ethan Wiley wrote the screenplay, and the story idea was mine.
Wow.
So that was my first movie, and Night of the Creeps was not that long after. That was about a year later.
Wow.
What was that feeling like to say, "Oh yeah, I've got this thing," and all of a sudden you're given the green light to go and do it? Did you feel ready for that?
I think so. I think I had a lot of self-confidence at the time, and I think it was the path I'd chosen, so there really wasn't any other route available to me, at least that I was willing to entertain. I think a lot of people give up maybe before they should, and I wasn't willing to, so I just knocked wood. And
yeah, because it's a daunting project to take on as a first movie, because you've got a lot of visual effects, you're dealing with stop motion effects, you're dealing with practical makeups, as well as it's got this comedic tone and being a horror movie at the same time. It's like it's a very interesting first picture to choose instead of doing kind of a safer pick. Like, did you love the challenge? Was there stuff involved that you were like, I don't know how I'm going to do this, but I'll figure it out on the day? Or was it a lot of fake it till you make it?
Well, I think really what it comes down to is you ask yourself, if this fails, am I ever going to be able to make another movie? So I really went out of my way to throw in every type of film I could. There's some film noir in it. There's some young romance in it. There's aliens from space. There's zombies. There's humor. There's pathos. So it was really kind of the kitchen sink movie. And at the end of the day, I think that was maybe although the movie was not successful, I think that was a smart first movie to make.
Yeah. I really like the character JC in it. It was played by Steve Marshall.
Yeah, we did a screening of it here. We
Yeah.
watched all your movies back to back.
Yeah, we watched Night of the Creeps, Monster Squad, and RoboCop 3 back
and
to
I
back,
think all of us fell in love with JC a little bit,
Yeah.
and we were
Yeah.
like, "Oh
Yeah,
man,
who
JC's
is this
awesome!"
kid?
Yeah,
And what happened to him? Yeah.
Steve Marshall is a very successful businessman
Yeah.
in Toronto.
Yeah,
Wow.
he was. He kind of stole every scene he was in.
Yeah,
Was he your first choice when he first came on, or
I think so. Yeah.
okay?
and then you of course had Tom Atkins playing Detective Cameron,
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
who was
Yeah.
phenomenal.
Phenomenal. Yeah.
It's this like boozed up detective, which is just great through the
Yeah.
whole film. It has some classic lines.
What's interesting is that, I'm a big fan of John Carpenter, and I got to work with him briefly early in my career as a writer. And I'd seen The Fog, I'd seen Escape from New York. I should have been aware of Tom, but when we were casting Night of the Creeps, he came in to read for the role of Detective Cameron, and he did the reading, and he left the room, and I turned to Eileen Starger, who cast the movie, and I said, "That's the guy." And what's interesting is he's different in all three of those movies.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it just turned out to be sort of a marriage made in heaven, because he was very open to my direction and really brought something very special that I think is, in some ways, is the glue that holds that movie together.
And it's in such a, I'd hate to say silly idea of a movie. You've got some.
It's a silly idea of a movie.
Well, I just. He deals with a lot of deep, dark stuff in that movie. Like, you have a scene where he's almost going to commit suicide, where he's saying,
Right.
he's got the oven on and he's about to, take himself out, and you're like, oh crap! Like, this is some dark stuff
and
that we're
he's
dealing
getting
with.
drunk and
Yeah.
and whistling to himself.
Yeah.
And I remember we were all watching that, going like, what's going on with the? And he's just like, I gotta go out. I can't.
Yeah.
It was a unique character, and I think it was really the perfect blending of a script that needed an actor, and an actor who needed something that he could sink his teeth into.
Did any producers get involved to try to edit it out certain scenes that you wanted, or did you get to keep everything you wanted in the film?
Well, if for fans of that particular movie, the original ending was jettisoned before we finished it and released it.
Yeah.
And that's the one we saw with the spaceship at the end.
Yes.
Yeah. Exactly.
So that was the ending that I intended to bookend the beginning, where we see these aliens dropping these canisters with the creeps in them. And so I was very disappointed that we did a sort of a cheesy, cheap scare ending. But when we redid the movie for DVD and Blu-ray, not all that long ago, I said, "Listen, I'm happy to be involved with this, but I would love to bring back the old ending." So that the original director's cut, that we now call that the director's cut, is the one that has the correct ending. So I was quite pleased to have that out there in the world.
That's great.
The slugs in it. How did you? Who came up with that idea? And because they look, it's all practical effect. Obviously, there's no CGI at the time, but or very little of it. But the slugs, I thought, was that something you came up with, or was that something that the special effects guys kind of rigged up? Because the way they move is just very.
Believe it or not, they're actually motorized race cars.
Really? Oh, that's okay.
They're battery-operated race cars, and then I don't know if it was David Miller who did our makeup special effects, or who exactly came up with the notion of rigging them so they could actually sort of wiggle.
You're right.
So they were made of rubber. They were cast in rubber, and when the wiggling happens, it looks like they're actually organic creatures.
Yeah,
yeah, moving around. Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah, it's a great movie. It's a lot of fun. We had a good time watching it.
Yeah.
Is there, particularly with that movie, is there anything that, if you could go back, is there anything that you would want to do differently, or watching it now, are you still happy with it, or are there any changes you would make to it?
I can't think of any. I mean, I was 26 years old or
Right.
something like that, and I was doing the best I could, and all of my influences are on my sleeve in that movie. You can tell. Lots of Spielberg lifts in that movie. But at the end of the day, it is what it is.
Yeah.
So
Did you write it going in knowing that you wanted to direct it as well, or
Yes.
did you? Okay, so you
Yes.
didn't want to just write it as a
Oh
writer.
no! It was specifically written as my directing debut,
Okay.
and that's also why it has so many genres. It's a genre blend. It's like, okay, you want to do a romance? I can do that. Look,
Yeah,
you want to do a zombie movie? Yeah, I can do that. You want a comedy? Yeah, I can do that.
no, and I thought it was very clever as well, doing the black and white at the
Oh, yeah.
beginning
Yes,
To
that was
kind of-
the 1950s. That was
to
great,
separate
yeah.
that time jump and everything. It was great.
It sounds simple, but the fact is that at that time when we were making movies on film, I'm waiting for the laugh. Making movies on film.
On what?
Back when we did that, you had to, to do black and white in a color movie, you had to print it on stock that wouldn't have a tint to it.
Oh.
So we had to do some tests to make sure that the black and white section didn't look slightly sepia tone or slightly blue or something like that. A boring anecdote, but I thought I'd share it.
Of course.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, please.
Have you met Chad? He does nothing but boring answers.
yeah. They lead nowhere.
Have you listened to this podcast? No one has. But the Godzilla screenplay, I really want to ask. So what was your vision for that? What did you end up like putting down on? What did you want to see as Godzilla doing, or what was that about?
It was kind of a predictable paint by numbers of what you would expect that movie to be. I think the only sort of plot twist that I added was that we did a scene where the military shows up in Mexico and they think that there's this giant reptilian creature and they find it dead on the beach. And so that was the twist, was we thought that would be Godzilla, but it's not. So they transport it to the Presidio in San Francisco for study so the scientists can decide what it is. And it turns out that it's a baby Godzilla and that its mom or its dad, it doesn't matter to me, but it's being pursued or to be saved by a much larger, more fearsome version of itself. So San Francisco becomes the playground for Godzilla to show up looking for the baby.
Oh,
That was sort of the broad concept of the movie.
And had you always been a Godzilla fan, or is it just something that you just want to work on?
No, Steve Miner was a big Godzilla fan, and he talked Toho into producing the first American Godzilla film that had ever been done. English language, fully filmed here, and he, for some reason, hired me to write it.
Wow.
And did you guys have to pitch to Toho to get their seal of approval?
I believe he did, but he had 2 hits under his belt. He'd done Friday the 13th Part 2 and Part 3 in 3D, and he wanted to do Godzilla 3D as well.
Wow.
It's interesting, like in 2014, we get a Godzilla that attacks San Francisco.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's like there's no new ideas. I'm also want to know how much James Gunn owes you for Slither.
Yeah.
Because I feel like he did a little. I mean, homage is a little.
You know what? I saw the movie. I don't really see it, but that's okay.
Okay, all right.
Fair enough.
I'll agree to disagree. I think he owes you a check.
James has been nice to me.
Yeah. And then so all of us are wearing some. Well, most of us are wearing some Monster Squad merch.
Of course.
Watson is wearing a Wolfman's Got Nard shirt. I'm wearing a Monster Squad shirt. We have some merch here on the table.
Story about this shirt. I wore this at a party I was at a nightclub, and Joss Whedon was there, and he saw the shirt and loved it so much he took a picture of it.
Is that true? Is that for real?
That is for real.
Wow. Oh wow.
So somewhere on one of Joss Whedon's old phones is a picture of me drunk with the shirt on.
He's probably drunk off.
He was just like, Wolfman's Good Nards, that's great.
Maybe you being drunk was more interesting to him than the show.
Possibly.
Yeah, that could be it.
This was all pre that stuff. So yeah, possibly.
But yeah, Monster Squad, and I think I've told you this before, especially in my correspondence with you in the past through email. It's probably one of the most influential films, certainly of my life. I know Watson is as
I was one of those kids that, I mean, you watch that movie and they're doing the little Monster Squad business cards.
Yeah.
I made those business cards as a child.
Yeah.
I had those. I made them up.
I watched it probably when I was maybe 10 or 11, and it came on television, and I had no idea what it was because I had missed it was 87, so I didn't know what it was. I was like, what is this? And it was like within the first 5 minutes, I was like completely hooked. And I was like, it's a kids movie.
Yeah.
And they're taking on, and I always loved Universal Monsters. I was always a fan of them as a kid. And I was like, what? They're taking on the Universal Monsters and they're kids.
The ultimate badasses.
The ultimate badasses, yeah. And and they're kids that I want to hang out with. They don't really give a shit. They talk horrendously, which as a kid you love that.
Because we were all doing that anyway.
Exactly. They're not really afraid, and they go out and they want to protect people from the monsters, particularly from Dracula, who's really the most terrible one of all the group. Yeah. And I loved it. And then so I watched this film, and it came on maybe about a couple months later, and I watched it again. And then for the next 10, 15 years, I couldn't find this movie anywhere. And I would always tell people about Monster Squad. Every time I went to a video store, I'd look for it. Every time I always wanted to buy it on VHS. Never found it. And then finally, when I was an adult, I think in 2007, 2008, they finally released the DVD. And I was one of the first people in line to buy it.
Yeah.
And I was like so excited to finally see Monster Squad for the first time in over a decade.
I love back in the day, like yet again, feel old, everybody. Going to a VHS store, going to the video store,
yes.
And there'd be a sea of these covers.
Yes.
And Stan here has the VHS copy of the Monster Squad, and it's got one of the best covers of all the kids on Dracula's car. You got the monsters behind them. And it just immediately grabs you. Immediately you're like, what is this? What's going on here?
Right.
And I remember as a kid, like, it was like those movies like this, like Beastmaster, and like, that just, you just...
Are you comparing Monster Squad and Beastmaster?
No. I'm just talking about the cover art in general.
Oh, okay.
Like, back in the day, I feel like, people really, could hook you with a really good piece of art like that.
Yes.
A poster or something that could really just grab your imagination.
Monster Squad.
And what's wrong with Beastmaster?
Yeah.
Well, that poster art is the one sheet poster from the release of the movie.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And the problem with Monster Squad, I'm very proud of it, and clearly it has its fans. But the problem with the movie is that it tanked at the box office.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And that was a bitter pill to swallow for me, because Night of the Creeps had been released regionally. It wasn't released everywhere, and did not do particularly well. And so Monster Squad was my second bomb in a row. And that's tough, particularly if making movies is the thing that you want to do more than anything else.
Yeah.
And so, how did you come up with the idea of Monster Squad? What was it about this particular project that really got you interested? And where did you pull the idea out?
Well, I had grown up on the Universal Monster movies. And seen them all, mostly at 3:00 in the morning, and had some very firm ideas about it. But what was interesting is that at the same time that I was becoming a monster fan, I was a huge fan of most of the old comedians of the 30s and 40s. I loved Abbott and Costello. I loved Laurel and Hardy. The Stooges, not so much. But I also loved the Little Rascals. And so I had in my head, I had the Little Rascals, the Our Gang comedies, and I had Bud and Lou Costello, who were the biggest box office draws of the 40s, by the way. And they made a movie when they were sort of running out of ideas. They said, hey, we own these monsters because we made all these movies, the Dracula, Frankenstein, the Wolfman. Let's have Abbott Costello meet Frankenstein. So that was one of my favorite movies when I was a kid, because it combined those two worlds that I loved so much. So I turned to Shane Black at some point when we were out of college and trying to break into the movie business. And I said, what if we did the Little Rascals meet the Universal Monsters? And we called it the Monster Squad. And we took it to Universal. And much to my endless amusement, they said, this intellectual property, this IP doesn't mean anything to us.
Really?
That's insane.
Jeez.
And I said, okay. And I realized, well, a lot of these are in the public domain. Now, we can call him Wolfman. They might sue us, but they don't seem to give a shit. So what if we do Frankenstein's the public domain, Dracula's in the public domain. These novels were written 150 years ago. So we sort of forged ahead, and we were very cautious. We knew that the creature might be a problem, the creature from the Black Lagoon, because that was the 50s, so the copyright was still in play. But the truth is, they just didn't seem to care, and we were just a little bit cautious. We didn't go out of our way to call attention to the fact that we were using intellectual property that Universal owned at that time, and we did it. We made Little Rascals Meet the Universal Monsters, and that's Monster Squad.
Nice.
And so, with Monster Squad, what when you who decided, was that also something that you wanted to make sure and direct, or did you just end up kind of falling into it? How did that work out with the director or the you?
No, I'd made a film.
Yeah.
In Night of the Creeps, and I said, what do I want to do next? And just the fact that Creeps did not do all that well didn't hinder me, because it's my passion. It's what I wanted to do. So Shane Black and I wrote the script together, and I said to my agent, I want to direct this next. I was in post-production on Creeps, actually, when we started to send it out, which is the smartest way to conduct your career. Always have the next one lined up before you're done with the previous one. And I was an enormous fan of a director-producer named Peter Hyams, because I had seen Capricorn 1, and I just thought that was just terrific. And I said to my agent, I'd love to meet Peter Hyams. So I guess Peter read the script of Monster Squad, and he said, hey, I'll meet the kid. So I went to Sony Pictures, which was originally MGM, and it's now Sony, and he had a big office there. He had a deal at MGM. And I walked into his office, and he had made 2010. So HAL 9000 was on the wall of his office.
Wow.
And it was very daunting and nerve-wracking to be having a meeting with a hero of mine while Hal is watching us. Is he going to suck all the oxygen out of the room, or what's going to happen? And I told Peter, listen, I've written this thing, and I would love for you to produce it for me. And for some crazy reason, he agreed and said he would do it. So it's a Peter Hyams production.
Was it a long conversation, or was it just kind of a...
It was the beginning of a relationship that lasted for, a year and a half. I think I don't know if he was looking to mentor a young filmmaker, but that's kind of what it came down to, is he really enjoyed being a producer who could come in and go, you're screwing that up. That's not, don't do that. And he was a hero of mine, so I was like, oh, great, okay, tell me what I should do. Right. So it ended up to be a nice collaboration.
Yeah, that's great.
Is it hard to push? I mean, you're talking... I'm sure 85, 86 here, where like these Universal monsters, like you said, Universal didn't want anything to do with them. The monsters of that day, it seemed kind of passe. Like everyone, I'm sure, is looking to like Freddy Krueger and Jason. And was it hard to push the idea of like, no, we want to do these, or were people trying to come back with like, why don't you make a more modern monsters and stuff like that?
I have to be honest. I've had a tremendous amount of luck in my career, as meager as it is, in regard to saying, here's what I want to do, here's the script, and what else do you need to know? And they're like, oh, that sounds good.
Wow.
That's
awesome.
Amazing. That's and putting the kids together, did you have an idea for what these kids had, their personalities, and who you wanted to play them? Or were they, because they're all pretty much newcomers, right? A lot of the actors at the time?
Yeah, no, traditionally, there haven't been at any one time a bunch of great kid actors. I mean, Disney had its little pool of actors in the 60s and the 50s, but they were basically characters that Shane and I had written, and we had a wonderful casting director named Penny Perry, and Penny brought these kids in, and they would read the part, and if it came to life for us, we'd go, hey, we got to think of that kid for this role. We got to think of that kid for this role. And then it's a matter of making sure that they all have different voices and look different, so that you don't sort of forget which one is which. And obviously, Andre Gower playing Sean, he was sort of the leader of the squad, and Patrick is sort of the bumbling sidekick, and everybody else, Horace and Phoebe, they all have their own part in the play, and it worked out really well.
Since you were such a monster fan and buff, were one of the kids like off of your personality, like you wrote them kind of connected to yourself in any way? Or
that's a great question. Not consciously. I'm sure that all of them have a little bit of me in them.
Okay. And so how much with the kids themselves? I know that Steven Spielberg has famously talked about. He's put it out in public that working with the kids in Goonies was difficult because it's a bunch of young boys and were children basically. Did you run into the same kind of thing on the set of Monster Squad, kind of corralling them because they're 11, 12 years old, they're bouncing off the walls?
I've heard those stories too, and I was lucky enough to work with Dick Donner on a couple of things, and I love him, and I think he's kind of a big kid himself, and maybe I'm the same way, but these particular kids I didn't really have much problem with. They were easily tamed.
Yeah.
I think it may be the chemistry of the Goonies was a little different than the group that I had.
Right. Yeah. Right.
When casting your Dracula, what were you looking into? Like, were you looking at a Bela Lugosi or a Christopher Lee, or were you trying to find something new in that character, or were you trying to go for an archetype kind of thing?
Maybe an archetype. I mean, Dracula is a tricky role because he's traditionally been played as sort of, there's a sexual component that nobody talks about, but it's clearly there. I mean, he hypnotizes women and he takes them into his underground lair, and there's clearly a subtext going on there. For me, the important thing was that he was scary. And I don't mean gnashing his teeth, although he does that. I don't mean him doing things that were scary, but just standing there having a kind of an attitude that would make the kids really stop in their place and be worried about what their next move is. And Duncan Regeer did that in spades. He was very Shakespearean.
Yeah.
He was very this sort of gaunt figure who brooks no quarter, and he really brought it.
There's some really jarring scenes in that movie. I think one of the first ones that really stuck out with me when I first watched it was when Dracula comes to the present and he has those girls in the closet, and the next time we see them, they're like his brides, like they've been turned. Oh, yeah. And I was like, holy shit! Like I remember watching that as a kid and be like terrified of him because
the closet is his refrigerator. That's where he keeps his food.
Yeah, exactly. And the other one that really stuck out to me is, especially as a kid, even to an adult in his day, is the Holocaust survivor who has the number on his arm, and he says, "Well, I've faced other monsters before." He tells the kids, and then we see the scene. It's just a very subtle, just a shot of his arm.
Yeah,
and
that's it. You don't need any more context than that, which is beautiful.
And it's never really touched upon in the film. It's just like this is what he's gone through. He's seen worse than Dracula and his minions.
Yeah, I was very pleased with that. It's very poetic and simple, and doesn't need to be explored more than it is.
No.
Who came up with the idea of having Wolfman be like this reluctant villain, which I thought was amazing because throughout the entire movie he doesn't.
Stan still thinks Wolfman's the hero of the movie.
he's constantly pleading to be locked up when the moon comes, and he doesn't want to hurt anybody, but he's constantly being locked up, and at the end, I know the original Wolfman was like that as well. Yeah, but it still hits me this day when he's at the final battle and he's shot.
Yeah. And
then he says he's dying. He kind of picks his head up and he says thank you, and he dies. Yeah. Oh my God. Oh. Yeah. Oh, to this day it still gets to me.
Yeah, that's Jonathan Gryce, wonderful actor.
Yes.
And, I mean, the truth is the concept of the Wolfman who wants to be to have this curse lifted from him is not new. That's a ripoff from Lon Chaney Jr. character.
Right.
Yeah. But yeah, Jonathan brought something that was very human and very relatable. And I remember when we did that, where he gets shot with a silver bullet, and we were talking, and I just whispered to him. I said, "When you say thank you, make it a question, because you've been living with this for so long. Is it really over now? So next time you see the movie."
Oh, man.
When he says thank you, he's kind of asking more than telling.
Oh man, yeah, I didn't think. Oh my God, yeah. I'm definitely gonna rewatch that now.
Well, his transformation scene in the phone booth. Is so well done.
So well done. Yeah.
That was second unit directed by Peter Hyams.
Wow.
That entire sequence is Peter's.
And I mean, we've talked about it between us, just like how hard it is after American Werewolf in London.
Yes.
How do you try not, it's hard to top that in terms of transformations.
Well, you also have to remember that The Howling was the year before.
Oh, that's true.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And in fact, Rick Baker was Rob Bottin was going to do, because he had worked on Piranha, he was going to do The Howling for Joe, but had already Rick Baker had agreed to Landis that he would do it. So anyway, both of the greatest practical werewolf transformations of all time were done within 2 years.
So crazy.
Right.
So I don't think there was ever a moment where we said, "Well, we can top those." We just, well, we have Stan Winston,
Yeah.
so suck on that.
No,
Exactly. Yeah.
if you go hard, go big, like
Exactly.
that. Yeah, exactly.
Do you see any when watching Stranger Things? I'm reminded of the father, and the father in Monster Squad, played by Stephen Mock. I'm like, well, that's kind of the same thing. There is it. Have you seen Stranger Things at all?
I have seen all of Stranger Things.
Do you agree with that? It's just that's
How many checks do they owe you?
yeah, seriously.
My only problem with Stranger Things is that they haven't asked me to direct episodes.
That's right. Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah, I agree with that.
Heard it here first. Get Fred Dekker.
That's right.
I think they're done now.
Yeah, there's the last season coming out.
I don't know.
Yeah, it's last season. Yeah.
Oh, with Tom Noonan as
Yeah, I was just
Frankenstein.
about to ask. Yeah, just go ahead.
But I mean, like, I was very drawn into his arc. Was it always the same, where he would get attached to the children when he goes to like infiltrate?
Well, clearly that's a steal from the original 1931 film with the little girl at the lake. But I think it's keying into the notion that everyone thinks of him as this piteous monster, but he's actually, I mean, he actually just wants to be accepted.
Yeah.
Right.
So in this innocent little girl, he sees a kindred spirit. That was my feeling about it.
Okay.
And I love how, I mean, pretty much every monster in there is being driven by Dracula. He's like the most evil one. Like the Wolfman doesn't really want to be a part of it. Frankenstein is just kind of trying to be accepted. Creature from the Black Lagoon is just a creature, and he's just
He's just there for
he's just
for the
there.
laughs,
And the
man.
mummy is kind of
He's
like
just
this.
there for shits and giggles.
Yeah, he's having a good old time.
And the mummy's just kind of like, same
I
thing. He's
love
kind of
the
this
mummy
stumbling thing,
better.
but it's Dracula, the one that's driving and pushing him. Was that how you always want? Is that how you guys always wanted to see it? Was Dracula
I
being
think
the,
I think so, because it's really hard, as we've just sort of made fun of, to make any of those creatures sort of the star of their own movie. So the beauty of the monster rally is that you have the leader, in this case Count Dracula, and the rest of them are sort of doing his bidding, and that makes for a very solid plot.
right? And in the studio never try to interfere, give notes or anything. They just kind of left you to your own devices.
Absolutely.
Oh
Wow.
So when it was completed, how did they go about trying to market it? Were they interested in marketing it, or were they just kind of like, what is this? How did that work out?
Well, I think they had to be interested because they'd put money in it, but there is a certain what is this quality.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know the answer to that question. I mean, we made the best movie we could.
Right.
It's then up to them to sell it properly. I think the way that they sold it had a certain sort of tongue-in-cheek quality, which I don't blame them for. I mean, the truth is it's a strange movie. It's a kind of an outlier movie.
Yeah.
And I can't really blame them. They definitely spent money to try and sell it. Some movies find their audience when they come out. Some it takes decades.
How did you feel when you felt this resurgence of the Monster Squad?
Oh,
Did you ever see that coming, or was it
Cult
it was kind of a
following?
surprise? Yeah, because it's really a cult following now, beloved by the kids that grew up watching it.
Yeah, it was a surprise. It was a surprise, but I wish I could say that it was made up for the fact that the movie didn't do well when it came out. The analogy that I've used, and it's in the movie Wolfman's Got Nards, which is a wonderful film about Monster Squad.
That's right.
and its legacy. And I say in that, and I can't top my analogy, which is it's like shooting a basket and then waiting 20 years to see it go in.
Wow. Yeah, it's a great film, and then I told you before we started the podcast, but it was definitely one of the films that inspired me to be a writer, which is what I'm trying to do now. Because when I first saw it, I was I was like 9 or 10 years old, whatever I was. And I knew that people wrote films, but I didn't really put it together because I was still a kid. And then I watched Monster Squad, and I was like, wow, somebody actually sat down and had a great time with a great idea of writing this and put it together. And I was like fascinated by that. So it was just I've been waiting to say it for many years, Fred Dekker. Thank you for doing that movie. It's just and Shane Black, because it was just so influential, and it's just to this day I'm still awed by the film.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
It means a lot to me.
We need to ask you about RoboCop 3, which is obviously one of the, again, I don't care what people say, and I've said it on the podcast before, and I'll defend it till the day I die. I think it's a great film. I love it. I liked it as a kid, and I don't know why it gets the hate it does nowadays, but
Me too.
how did that end up happening with you being behind RoboCop 3?
The truth is that it was just offered to me. Now, part of this is there's a wonderful, there was a dear friend of mine, Michelle Manning, who was an executive at Orion. And I think she urged the powers that be at Orion Pictures to look at Monster Squad and see that there is a world where you can make something that's got a hard edge, but that also can appeal to a wider audience. And the problem with it isn't a problem, but the RoboCop films, they're very funny and they're very kind of crazed, but they were both, the first two R-rated, and I think what happened was they were selling toys. They were just selling RoboCop toys and the equivalent of coloring books and all the stuff that goes with kid stuff. And they were like, but these movies are R-rated. And so the corporate decision was we should do a PG or a PG-13 RoboCop. So again, they were looking at Monster Squad, which, although it was not a successful movie, was successful, I think, creatively, in creating something that was PG-13 that straddled that line between a kid movie and a movie that older audiences would like. So I think that was one of the reasons that they hired me, because they saw that I could do that.
And were you into RoboCop prior to that? Was it something that you?
I love the first movie. I think it's great.
Yeah. And so when you got the opportunity, we listened to the DVD commentary, and
what did they say? I don't remember.
There was already a script that was written.
Yes, the Frank Miller script.
Yeah, the Frank. And so you saw it, and there's something that you really wanted to go with, right?
Well, I'm a huge fan, and certainly was at that time, of Frank Miller. I think Frank Miller reinvented Batman. The Batman that we know today is Frank Miller's Batman. It's as simple as that.
Right.
Yep.
And so I was a huge fan of his, and I thought, well, geez, a Frank Miller script, great. And then I did do some work on the script. I did rewrite it, because I'm not sure. I love Frank, and I think he's a genius, but I'm not sure he ever cracked how to write a screenplay as opposed to a comic story that is transferred to the screen. And when I look at the films that he's directed and the films that he wrote that that were made from his work, I see the same thing. It's kind of like, that's a comic book.
Yeah.
It's not a movie. And so the changes that I made were really to make it more of a movie. So I added action sequences and I added visual stuff. Not that he isn't a great artist, but even toning it down, I think Frank's work doesn't, if you tone it down, it isn't Frank anymore.
Yeah, right.
So I had to do that really for the studio, because that's what they hired me for.
Did you get to meet Frank?
Oh yeah, we worked together.
Okay.
Yeah. And we had, Mexican food near Paramount Pictures, and shot the shit, and he was great.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Now, I read that they wanted to start production on RoboCop 3 pretty much like right after filming RoboCop 2. Does that sound accurate?
No, because when I got the job, I went and saw RoboCop 2.
Oh, okay.
So it was in the theaters already.
Oh.
So I shouldn't listen to the internet. Okay.
Well, nobody's going to make a sequel until they've seen how the previous one does.
Okay.
So I think they looked at the box office at Robo 2 before they greenlit Robo 3. You also have to know that the studio, Orion Pictures, was in financial straits at that time.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And they were filing bankruptcy. So anything that they made sort of had to be a sure bet, or it had to be something they'd already spent money on. So it was a precarious time
Okay.
at that studio.
I also read they paused production in the middle of filming, like for a year. Is that sound accurate too?
Nope.
Or? Nope.
Nope.
Okay. All right.
No, what they did was we shot the movie and then they paused the release for a year.
That's okay.
I see. Okay. And so you get RoboCop and so you get Frank Miller's script, start working with him. What was the vision for this movie itself? Was it something that was what we ended up seeing? Was that what you wanted it to be, with RoboCop standing up to the rehab people, with the people who were being pushed out standing up to OCP, and this like heavily like Japanese corporation influence on OCP? Is that the overall vision that you wanted?
Yeah. And a lot of that was Frank. Frank, I think, brought in the Japanese element because he's done a lot of his work has a Japanese component to it. Right. The samurai and all that. And so I thought that was cool by itself. But the bigger picture is, I think it's a real left wing kind of paradigm.
Yeah.
And I think that for all the brickbats that the movie gets and for all of the shit that people throw at it, its heart, I think, is really in the right place, because what it's saying is the corporation is dangerous. And when you look at the world that we're in right now, Warner Brothers, you see, creative choices being dictated by financial considerations, and when your business is creativity and you're letting the bottom line ruin that aspect of it. So this was really a movie about fascism. And I very consciously made the rehabs look like Nazis. And I'm really proud of that, because the day that we forget what Nazis are, we might as well all just jump off a cliff.
I think that just like Monster Squad, I think there's a lot of jarring scenes in RoboCop 3. And again, I watched this. I was a demographic for it, I guess, what the studio thought the demographic should be. I was a kid. I was 12, 13, whatever it was.
At that time, they were aiming a lot of rated R stuff. It was
kids,
weird to see, like, we had Terminator toys. There was Aliens, Predator. They all got action figures.
Right.
The Rambo had a cartoon series.
Right, that's
like,
right. Yeah,
it's a weird time to think about all these like rated R properties that were being given to kids.
Right.
Yeah.
And RoboCop definitely was one of those.
Well, and so like I was telling you before the podcast started, I was raised by a single mother, and she worked all the time. So a lot of my, I guess, a part of my moral compass came from television movies that I watched. And at the time, it was especially in the 80s and 90s, TV, we had kind of gray characters who were the good guys, right, quote unquote. But it always skewed towards justice. It always skewed towards, if you're a bad guy, if you treat people badly, you will lose, because the bad guy's the good guy's probably going to get his ass kicked a couple times, but he's going to come back and win. But one of the great scenes in RoboCop 3 was when OCP orders the cops to go into the neighborhoods and evict all the people.
Yeah.
And the cops are like, the police chief saying, well, that's kicking people out of their homes is not a cop's job. He says, and he takes his badge off. He's like, fuck this, I'm not doing this, and and he throws down his badge, and then the rest of the cops are like, the hell with this, and they start throwing, and the OCP suit is standing there. It's like, you're all employees of OCP, he's like yelling at him, and he's like, you're giving up your benefits, and I love that
Robertson.
part. They're just throwing down their badges at his feet and just walking out, and they join the people who are being evicted against the rehab personnel.
Yeah.
Well, it's a great arc through all three movies. You see the cops in the first movie becoming, they work for a corporation.
Right.
The second one, they're on strike.
Yes.
And then by the third one, they're like, this is not working. The capitalist system of taking care of people is not working.
Yeah.
It is a little bit of socialism, but no, it's a great arc for the cops.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Was that also Frank Miller's script? That was also his, with the cops walking out?
I believe so, yeah.
Oh.
I mean, the question is the title of these movies is RoboCop.
Right.
Yeah.
Which by itself is kind of interesting, because it's saying, is this a machine and its job is to uphold the law? Well, how can a machine uphold the law unless it's programmed by another entity that maybe doesn't want to take responsibility for doing it? I mean, it might be the wrong place for a PG-13 kids action adventure to have that kind of political perspective, but I didn't think twice about it.
Yeah.
And I think some of the best stuff in the movie is that kind of thinking.
Absolutely.
We're here's what it's about, folks. Pay attention.
Well, like I was even younger than Stan here seeing it, and I'll admit a lot of the plot went over my head because I just see robots and all that.
But you want more Ed 209?
Yeah. And watch it, like when we watched it recently, I was like, oh man, there's so much I missed.
Yeah.
That I was like, this is much better than from what I remember.
And watching it now, the crop of actors you have, like some amazing.
Oh yeah.
You've got CCH Pounder, you've got Bradley Whitford, you got Stephen Root. It's just insane. They're powerhouses in this movie.
Yeah. Was that the cast that you wanted specifically?
Oh yeah. Oh wow. Yeah.
And how was it working with some of them? I mean, Rip Torn was in it. I mean, my God,
I have a Rip Torn story. He's not with us anymore, so I can share this. There was a day where we were doing the scene, and I was directing. However, I was directing, and he was acting. However, he was acting, and he comes up to me after the take, and he said, "Oh, I thought it was an air raid."
Oh, there's some motorcycles outside. Yeah.
Okay, we'll wait for the air raid to end. It's like London, 1943. So we did a take, and Rip Torn comes up to me and he says, "I feel like I'm a trained dog when I'm working with you." And I think he was upset, but I sort of took it as a moment of pride.
Yeah.
And I've only really found out recently, because I've been doing a little bit of a book about the Actor Studio. Rip was one of the key figures in the Actor Studio in the 50s and changing the whole landscape of actors. And I was like, had I known that, I probably wouldn't have been such a dick.
Did you ever ask him about the Norman Mailer story?
I did not.
No, I would definitely ask him about that, because you probably would have opened up and be like, yeah, I did it.
Oh man.
Yeah, I was in character. What do you want from me? I would have loved that. But
interesting time.
Yeah, for those of you who don't know, he was in a movie that Norman Mailer was directing, and they were supposed to be. It was obviously they were acting that they were supposed to be fighting, and Rip Torn actually hit him in the head with a hammer.
Yeah, it's all. You can watch it all.
It's on YouTube.
Yeah. It's wild.
Yeah. He was a real character.
Yeah.
He was a real character, and the reason that he was cast in the movie was that. Somebody help me. Who played the old man in the other two RoboCop movies?
Oh yes.
Dan O'Hurley.
Yeah.
Dan decided not to do the movie. He read the script, and he decided that because OCP was sort of taken down at the end, that signaled that the old man had failed and he was weak. And he said, "This is not a weak man." And we had a wonderful lunch before we finished the script, and I was looking forward to working with him, but he decided not to play the part because he didn't like how it depicted that character.
Oh, interesting.
Yep.
Huh.
In the there was a recent game that came out, RoboCop Rogue City, and it takes place between the second movie and the third movie, and it kind of leads into the third movie with the Japanese element company kind of buying OCP, and how they handle his character is that. He was plotting to make an army of RoboCop 2s, and he actually
because RoboCop 2 worked out so well.
I know. And he apparently has a heart attack in the game, and he puts his own brain in the RoboCop suit, and you fight him.
See, there you
at
go.
the end of the game.
There's the next sequel.
So it was like
there it is, yeah.
So that was their kind of way, I guess, as to showing the fall of OCP, where Mako's company had to come in and like help him up.
Can we switch chairs here? Because I've never said this for public consumption. In fact, I don't think I've told anybody. It's just my own little, how we have our little secrets that are just ours. If you were to ask me, what would you do differently if you had it to do over again? And part of this is fan service, part of it is audience service, but I think I made a big mistake in this movie. And the mistake is that in the third act of the movie, when Robo is getting the crap beat out of him and the homeless are being mowed down by the evil corporation and the rehabs and all that stuff, What I should have done is suddenly there's a big loud screeching of metal and everybody turns and a wall opens up and there's Nancy Allen and she's RoboCop 3.
Yeah.
Ah.
Wow.
Wow.
And why it took me 30 years to think of that, I just can't say.
Look, if Lucas can keep making special editions and changing his movie,
Yeah.
Yeah,
You can
exactly.
see, but I disagree with that. If you want to talk seriously about cinema,
you think once the final print is done, it's done?
I think so.
Yeah.
I mean, Star Wars was a huge movie for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I was a teenager, so it wasn't like I was a little kid. I was like, oh crap, this is the future. This guy is a master.
Yeah.
Loved that movie, and I loved the second one as well. But going back and tinkering with these movies ad infinitum, I think does a real disservice to the movies and to us.
Yeah.
Yeah. I have issues with it when, especially that movie won Best Editing Oscar for Best Editing.
Star Wars.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And you're changing the edit that won you an award.
Right.
Like, why, I just like, why would you do that? But
Do you believe in director's cuts then?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, like, I mean, I have the set of editions of Blade Runner. Ridley Scott's done like, I think it's
bunch
4
of-
different
Yeah,
kind of
something
cuts.
like that. Yeah.
One is his like final cut,
Yeah.
which I think has the narration in it from Harrison Ford, if I'm correct. But like, I always like to see that finality of like, this is what the director
Right.
had in mind from the beginning. So
I guess, the big difference being like, you can still find all those other versions with
true.
Star Wars. Those original
Oh yeah, they're hard. You
cuts
can't find it.
don't exist anymore.
Right. Right.
You can't find them
Which
on
is-
streaming. You can't
Yeah.
find them on physical media anymore
Yeah.
unless you have the original, tapes.
And then Coppola, he did a recent cut of what was I'm blanking on the Vietnam
Apocalypse Now.
Apocalypse Now.
Now.
Yeah, he did another cut of that, and I was like, it's already so much in there. It's
I don't know. It's such a strange mindset. I mean, I think even if MG, whoever owns Orion now, I think it might be MGM, but
Yeah.
somebody else may own MGM now. But if somebody came to me and said, "Hey, I listened to your podcast, and we would like to, give you $10 million to do your scene and bring Nancy back and blah blah blah," I'd go, "I would love to do that, but why?"
Yeah.
And I think that's the problem, is that so much of, if you're George Lucas or Ridley Scott or these people, you can do kind of whatever you want at this point, but nobody could say no. I mean, George can pay for it out of his own pocket.
Right.
But what if it's not the right thing to do? Particularly when it's more than one time. It's like, if you haven't nailed it after 3 cuts, make a different movie.
Yeah.
Right,
yeah.
That's a good point.
what if it was a sequel and you had a chance to direct again for like RoboCop 4? Would you still consider Ann Lewis bringing her back as a?
We just have to figure out how to do it.
Oh, okay.
I just think that would have been such an effective ending, and
Yeah.
I think people would like the movie a lot more if we'd done that. But there you have it.
I listened to your DVD commentary, and one of the things you said was that about RoboCop 3 was that you feel that you didn't take enough chances with it, and I see what you mean with that. But I think one of the biggest shocks to me watching, because I had been I loved RoboCop as a kid, and I'd rewatch all, so I was really excited when the third one came out, and then Ann Lewis gets gunned down, and I was like looking around like, what just happened? Like, she's not dead. Like, if you had done what you just said about bringing her back, okay, well, that makes sense. But that's it. The movie ends, and I'm like, at the end, I remember watching it as a kid and thinking at the end of the movie, like, wait a minute, where's Ann Lewis? Like, is she really dead?
Right.
And I think that was a huge risk that you took there, and it was definitely not playing it safe in that respect, because you killed off a major character. And you said the rumor has been that she wanted to be off, but in the DVD commentary you contradicted it and said, well, we told her that we were going to kill her off, and then she wasn't very pleased about that.
She wasn't.
Yeah, so I think that you took a huge risk doing that. And what motivated you to do that? Was it something that you wanted to shock the audience, or what was the reason behind that?
Well, it wasn't nothing against Nancy. I love Nancy.
Yeah.
I think what it was really just to sell the bad guy.
Yeah.
I can't remember exactly the dialogue, but she says something to the degree of, if you want to get in here, you're going to have to shoot through us.
Yeah.
And John Castle, wonderful British actor. I'm
Oh, yeah.
so happy with him. And he says, I don't have a huge problem with that. And he shoots her.
Yeah.
And kills her dead in
Right.
front of the church. And I thought, well, that's pretty great. Let's do that. And then when Robo carries her up the altar and he puts her down,
Yeah.
and the idea of I'm not remotely religious, but I know iconography when I see it.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
And
Of
having
course.
RoboCop let her die there in the church, and RoboCop himself is a resurrected dead guy.
Yeah.
It's like if you're into symbolism and stuff, that works pretty well.
I could definitely see the comic book influence in that shot too, as he's walking her through the church. He's he's carrying her
Yeah.
through the church, and I remember watching that as a kid and being so emotional because I didn't know that. I was like she must be coming back, but at the moment I was like, oh, this is a sad scene. But
See, here's the irony. You're right. If I had done that, if the scene was exactly as it was, and then she came back, it's
Yeah.
even better.
Well, I'm thinking about it now, like him laying her to rest. I could see him not wanting her to be tortured like he is. He's
right.
this robotic.
So he should have punched her in the face. And
I
put
mean,
her-
yeah,
Go for a
Put her out of
headshot.
her
That would-
misery.
that would've definitely shocked me,
Headshot to put her out of her misery.
because I know they
Her last
like
line is, "You were bulletproof. Why wasn't I behind you?"
because I like in the first movie at the end when she's all shot up, he's like, they'll fix you. They fix everything.
Yeah.
So it's like the fact that didn't hit his mind. I would think he was like, you know what? I don't know. It felt like he was.
I think you needed, and I'm just spitballing, but like you needed him to have like all those connections kind of severed for him to kind of join that resistance.
Yeah,
As well.
That's true.
I think that's
Yeah.
true.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
that's true. I also think I think that RoboCop, that what remains of Murphy is tortured by being in this cybernetic organism.
Yeah.
And there's a part of him that maybe, and Bob Burke and I never talked about this. This is actor stuff way beyond what we did in the movie. But if he really pinned me down, like, how do I feel about this?
Yeah.
I'd say, you don't want her to go through what you went through. So put her out of her, let her die,
Yeah.
because that's what she wants and that's what you want. And there's nothing you can do about it.
Wow. Yeah. It's such an iconic.
Yeah.
As a kid, just watching that, I remember just thinking, like, oh my god, they can't be doing this. They can't. And her kind of bringing her back would have been like, oh yeah, of course, that's par for the
Well,
course.
I have to say, in my defense, movies do that way too much.
Right,
They do.
exactly.
I do think
Yes.
it would have been a great finale if
Yeah.
she shows up and saves the day.
Right.
But in a way, we've seen that before.
Exactly.
And
Yeah.
what we did was a little more honest.
Yes, that's what I'm saying. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. You're gonna say something.
I just want to touch on the casting of Robert Burke as Murphy. Obviously, I feel like he kind of got a lot of heat as well after taking, because everyone loves Peter Weller as that character, but I mean, it's a hard role to kind of come into, and I thought he did a great job. I thought, so I don't feel like he got his flowers for taking that role on and strapping that suit on.
Right.
Yeah.
And doing his best to make it believable and like a very seamless transition. All three movies feel like you could watch all three back to back, and it does feel like it's one story. It doesn't feel like there's three directors and three different, different groups and teams on them.
Yeah,
like
yeah.
so. I just would love was casting him. Was it an easy process, or was it hard to try and find someone to fill that role?
Well, I have to be honest. Part of it was finding somebody who would fit in Peter's suit, because we couldn't make a new suit.
Yeah.
And we did meet a lot of actors, but the real answer is that Bob had an integrity that to me was more important. I didn't want somebody to do a Peter Weller impression.
Yeah.
I think that's a mistake. When you recast a role, I think that's a mistake. It never works. So I was really happy with him. I thought he really brought it.
Yeah.
And sorry, go ahead. The Johnny Rehab
Yes.
There's a cartoon in there,
Yes.
and then there's action figures. Was that your poking at? Because you were just talking about how they wanted to market all this PG-13 stuff, or I mean rated R stuff to kids. Was that you poking fun at them, like, go fuck yourself? Because
No. No.
Yeah,
It was me poking fun at society and the world, where you suddenly something that's horrible and fascist. But if we can make money doing a toy about it, By the way, that commercial, the cartoon, was directed by one of my best friends, David Silverman, who you know as the director of The Simpsons.
Yep, that's right.
Oh wow.
And who came up with the Johnny Rehab toys? Was that where are they? Because I want them.
You want a collection of Johnny
I want a collection
Rehabs?
of Johnny Rehabs. Yeah.
It might be Frank. It was,
Really?
it was
really?
me or
Yeah.
Frank. I can't remember
That's
where
great.
that came from, but the commercials were fun. It was
Yeah.
like, oh yeah, we get to stop and do a little let's just do a little funny commercial here.
In terms of that, like kind of in kind of meta way, was the idea of Robo having the flight pack and the the gun arm?
He's
was
a
that,
toy.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Was it a
yeah.
lot of that of like, we need to sell toys?
That's
Do we
what
need to
I was
add-
wondering too. How much of that was the studio saying, "Hey, we need to put this in here because we need to sell toys"?
They didn't make those toys. They didn't make RoboCop with a gun arm and a flight pack until 2 years ago.
Oh, okay.
So no,
Oh, okay. All
that
right.
was me just sort of making fun of culture.
right.
Yeah.
Which is, well, we got RoboCop's back. What cool stuff is he going to have? He didn't have.
It's gotta have something new.
Got to have something
Yeah.
new.
Was for the Ed 209, was there supposed to be like extra scenes with it? Because she obviously hacked
Nico, right? And
yeah.
Nico, oh, I love that.
Yeah.
She just hacked him to blow open the warehouse they were.
Oh,
taking
okay.
in.
It felt like it could have tagged along with them and like be an extra.
Well, I was taking a big risk with the amount of time before Robo shows up.
Okay.
And so even then I was like, I don't know, do we have enough time for Ed 209? I don't
Yeah.
know.
And that was a full practical at 209,
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
It's,
Right.
it's
Oh, wow.
beautiful. I mean,
It's
like,
gorgeous. Yeah.
Was
Yeah.
it the original?
I believe so. I think they made a new
wow.
one.
Oh, okay.
Man.
I think they may have made 2 or 3 in total for all 3 films.
Wow.
Wow. And so one of the other scenes that really sticks out to my head especially when I was a kid, was the introduction of the splatterpunks.
yes.
It was a terrifying scene because the cops get in an accident. They're like, oh, and the actor who's involved in the accident, and they're both kind of like ribbing each other, like, what are you doing? Like, what are you doing? Like, and they're kind of just ribbing, like, oh, fuck you, no, fuck you. It's kind of going back and forth, and then all of a sudden they see the tag on the wall,
Right.
yeah.
And
they're
then they
like-
hear a whistle off in the
a
distance.
whistle, and then
Yeah.
you hear the laugh,
Yeah.
and that's when they're like, holy shit. And they're like, this is splatterpunks. And then and of course the guy's like, what are you talking about? And they
Right.
get shot immediately.
And I definitely felt very Dark Knight Returns
Yes,
kind
yeah.
of
that's
vibe
exactly
with the
what-
splatter
yes.
punks and everything. And I
Well,
was just
there
like,
was a gang in Dark Knight Returns that was called something similar.
They were punks, weren't they?
the mutants.
Mutants, yeah.
Yeah, and it was definitely that was either Frank or it was me ripping Frank off.
But I love that scene because it's terrifying. The cops, it immediately changes shit, like tone immediately. It's just they're kind of having fun, and all of a sudden they're terrified. And the actor who caused the accident gets shot, or gets caught up in the accident, gets shot. And then the cops are, now it's like the Wild West. All of a sudden they're like circling the wagons.
They're in enemy territory.
Yeah, and you see the punks coming out of the darkness in the corners, and it's just, and here comes RoboCop.
I'm glad
to
you
save.
liked that. I thought it was spooky.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no,
I love
absolutely.
That scene. I love
sold
that
it.
scene.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and you get Robo gets hit with the fire.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Set him on fire.
Molotov cocktail. Yeah, and it's just like it does something to the suit where you see like this kind of like, it's not scarring, but it's like the kind of burned
A char.
look. The char.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I thought it looked really badass. I don't know.
Is it true that he was supposed to originally, when he got set on fire, that's why he doesn't look like Peter Weller? Because that's what we heard. No.
God.
Oh, okay.
The internet is a dark,
Yeah.
dark
Damn it,
place.
damn it, internet, lying to me again.
Well,
Yeah.
you're sitting at home, you're at your laptop.
You're on
maybe,
Reddit.
Maybe this is why. You
Yeah.
Yeah, because the story is he got burned and like his jaw like got burned off, and that's why he doesn't look like Peter Weller.
Well, I'm a big James Bond fan, and years ago I read about like, okay, when Lazenby took over for Connery or whatever, it's like, they changed his face so that the bad guys don't know who he is.
Right.
It's like, oh, shut up.
Not to digress too much from RoboCop, but speaking of James Bond, you wrote the story for If Looks Could Kill, the kid James Bond.
Yes.
Was that like out of the blue, or was it more?
Well, coming off of the Monster Squad,
Yeah.
which was kind of a blend of genres, which I always love when it's done right.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Where you have a comedy and you have it's everything goes back to Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein. So you've got the Little Rascals and you got the Universal Monsters. So then I said, well, what about? Honestly, I can say this truthfully. The inspiration for If Looks Could Kill, which was originally titled Teen Agent. Was
Which it was in England when I saw it.
Right.
I was a kid in England. So.
that was the title, my original title.
Oh, okay.
wow.
And I
love
guess
that title.
Warner Brothers thought that was too cool, so they changed it to something that makes no sense. It's stupid.
Yeah.
But I was a huge fan of Anthony Michael Hall in 16
Oh,
Candles
yeah.
and Breakfast Club. And I wrote that for him.
Wow.
I just said, I'm going to write an Anthony Michael Hall movie. And I'm also a James Bond fan. So what if
Yeah.
Anthony MichaelAll was mistaken for James Bond? And
I
that's
totally
the
see
premise.
him in that role. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
And I did meet him, and it was a really nice meeting. He and I watched MTV for a while, and then I went outside and I out on a balcony with his mom, and we talked about his life and all that. And he at that time was being wooed by Stanley Kubrick to do Full Metal Jacket, to play the Matthew Modine role.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow.
Wow.
And she was so open and kind, and she goes, I don't know, I hear that he films for 3 years, and Michael's a teenager, and he's just he's having some problems in school because he's an actor now, and there's some ego stuff. And it was like, oh boy. So but anyway, yeah, I wrote that for him. And then when that didn't happen, I kind of lost interest. I was interested in directing it too.
Oh, okay.
Because it was going to be, it's like Monster Squad. It's just I'm going to take two things I love and just jam them together.
Yeah.
And then they miscast the lead. Nothing against Richard Grieco, but the whole point is it's a nerd
Yeah.
Right.
who's mistaken for a spy. It's like a kind of a cool, matinee idol who's mistaken for a spy. That's just
Yeah.
stupid. Man. So yeah, so I have a story credit on it, but somebody else rewrote it.
Gotcha.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Yeah.
We were talking about that in the car right over because I remember watching that movie as a kid.
Yeah.
Really?
And because I was a big James Bond nerd, and anything that was spy kind of
gadget heavy.
yeah, exactly.
Spy adjacent.
Yeah,
Yes.
I loved it.
Some of the other things that I love about, I just got to go back to RoboCop 3.
Yeah.
Some of the, I just because this has been, I've been these scenes have
I'm
been
on
stuck in my
cloud
head.
9, guys.
Yeah.
Nobody
Oh,
talks
good.
about this movie. I am on cloud 9.
These are the scenes that have been stuck in my head since I was a kid. The other when OCP tries to frame RoboCop,
Oh, yeah.
and they have his foot his,
Oh, the
his,
news
stomping
report.
around
Yes.
with all these
Stepping
dead
on-
bodies.
Right.
Yeah, and the news reporter stands up like, this is bullshit. Like I can't, and she throws the thing down and she walks off.
Yeah.
And I love that part because that's when it begins to turn. That's when the people begin to turn against OCP.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And right after that, you have the cops like walking out like, we're not doing this. We're not working for you anymore.
All right, you want some trivia?
Yes,
Yeah.
please.
Okay. In Night of the Creeps, we are witness to a nightmare that Detective Cameron, played by Tom Atkins, has. But in the nightmare, initially he's on a beach drinking a coconut shell cocktail, and this beautiful girl comes over and gives it to him and then walks off.
Yeah.
That beautiful girl in Night of the Creeps is the sister of the newscaster in RoboCop 3.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's the LaRue sisters.
Oh, I love
Yeah.
it.
Jeez.
Yeah, I
All connected. It's all
Yeah.
connected tissue.
it's a whole
I
universe.
try
yeah.
to have everything
The
connected
Fred
as
Dekker
much
universe,
as-
yeah.
There you go.
There it
I
is.
really go out of my way to try and do that.
And so I know going back to the DVD commentary, you said that you felt that you made a lot of mistakes in this movie. I didn't disagree with some of that. I think that it was still a really solid film. But
You're gonna yell at him and disagree with him right here in his face.
because I think it's a great
The
film.
gall
I
you
love.
have.
It was my best experience making the movie.
Yeah. But you said that people got really upset that he was flying too. What kind of a backlash did you get for that? For putting him in the jet pack?
I don't know how to respond.
Yeah.
I don't know what to say to that. He can be a dead guy in a robotic skeleton
Exactly.
that shoots at another RoboCop that's got a brain sticking in a big plastic.
Yeah.
That's addicted to drugs.
But no, he can't fly.
You've gone way too far now, Dekker.
You've
Now
crossed
it's
the
over.
line,
Yeah,
man.
that's
You
it.
have crossed the line.
Because who's ever heard of a guy in an iron suit flying around?
Nope.
You know that doesn't work. Yeah, See, way ahead of the game, Fred. Way ahead of the game. I personally like how great he looks, and you remember you saying this, that you wish that you would introduce the flight suit in a different manner. Do you still feel that, or is it because it's just like in the beginning they steal it,
Right?
Because like the rebels steal it, like, oh,
Yeah.
that looks expensive, take it.
Yeah.
And in the end, the doctor who joins the rebels
Dr.
says,
Lazarus, yeah.
Dr.
Yeah,
Lazarus is like, oh yeah, this is it's a jetpack for RoboCop. How do you know? I designed it.
Yeah.
And you weren't very happy with that, apparently, with that introduction. But I think it's like
Somebody snuck in and pretended to be me when they said that. 'Cause I think it works fine.
I think it works
Yeah.
fine too. Yeah, I like the introduction of it. It works fine. Yeah. And so we get RoboCop flying around. That final scene was really well done with the splatterpunks coming at the rebels, and how it's a very heavy action scene. Did you have a lot of experience like directing something like that? Because
That's the
everybody's
biggest-
shooting, there's explosions, cars are blowing up.
That's the biggest scene I've ever done.
Yeah.
Wow.
How was that?
It was fun.
Yeah.
It was fun. I mean, it's a lot of cameras. It's a lot of effects.
Yeah.
It's a lot of good assistant director work.
Uh-huh.
But
Do you believe in doing a lot of storyboarding before doing sequences like that?
yeah, I try to storyboard everything.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't mean you use it all the time.
Right.
I mean, a scene like that, you sort of want to know what the pieces. You call that a shot that you're going to put in a sequence. What are the pieces? Well, I want a piece of this, and I want to be able to see that. And sometimes you storyboard that, and sometimes you need to be there on the day and see what it looks like in person. And that's where you go, okay, master shot here. Let's get a piece of that. Let's get to that. And it's all about working with talented people who you have that conversation, and they go, "What about this?" And you go, "Oh, that's even better." That's what you want.
Right. Right. And so some of the special effects it was all practical, obviously, except for the stop motion stuff of like RoboCop flying around. But what was your influence for some of the special effects that you used in the film?
Let me tell you a story. Do you know who Rob Bottin is?
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you know who Phil Tippett is?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, hire those guys
Uh-huh.
and shut the fuck up.
Just let them do what they do.
Let them do what they do.
That's awesome.
Yeah. I've heard you call Robatine a genius, basically.
I think he's a genius.
Yeah.
I think Phil is too.
Yeah. The face that Tomo the android has
Yes.
after he's
Yes.
Oh,
Oh,
he
yeah,
shot in the face.
yeah.
And
how did
Rob.
that come? I mean, who that was Rob, right?
That's
Who's-
Rob.
Wow.
The only direction I gave him was think of him as like a Japanese china bowl.
Whew. Yeah.
Yeah.
So in other words, if you have a cyborg or a robot and you destroy their head, what's he made of? What's it going to look like? There's a million choices you could make.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But I thought let's have him be cracked like a piece of china.
Yeah.
yeah, with that terrifying
It's
grin.
creepy.
Yes.
Yeah.
So good.
Yeah.
And then I kind of love there's no like answer to what there's no like is he a cyborg, like is there a brain in there, is he an android,
Yeah.
like it's just this almost like just this force that just keeps coming,
Yeah.
and then you see the scene where there's multiple of them, you're like, oh shit, like this is a whole army of these guys that could be out there.
Conveyor belt of them.
Yeah.
I have to ask you about filmmaking nowadays, particularly. I think, unfortunately, we're in this really heavy era right now within the last 15, 20 years, certainly 10, 15 years, of like this very heavy CGI use right now. What do you think about that, as opposed to practical effects, which is what you really work with in your career? What do you?
Special effects have to suit the story you're telling. And what happened with CGI, I remember, I don't know if I was talking to Phil about this, but I heard very early on the story of him because Phil Tippett did Jurassic Park.
Right.
And prior to Jurassic Park, had done all stop motion animation, the little things in the chess game in Star Wars, and the at walkers in Empire Strikes Back.
Yeah.
That's all. That's all Phil Tippett, and it's stop motion animation, old school like Gumby and Pokey. And then along comes CGI, which they realized was probably the best way to do Jurassic Park. And there's a famous clip of the first test of how this was going to work. And Phil, I think this is apocryphal, but it makes for a good story, is that Phil was watching that clip, and it was the first CGI, and it wasn't animated by him, although he had helped design it. And he saw this, and he said, "We're extinct," referring to stop motion animation. What was your question?
What do you think? CGI right now is so heavily prevalent. What do you think that compared to? The
answer to your question is that great CGI kind of can't be beat. The dinosaurs in the first Jurassic, and I've sort of lost interest as Spielberg stepped away from those films. But I love the first two. And the dinosaurs are fantastic. And it's the only way to do it. I mean, there are full-sized animatronic dinosaurs in both of those films for close-ups and things, but it's kind of the only way to do it. But when people use CGI because it's the cheapest way to do it, by and large, you can kind of tell.
Right.
I mean, back to Otomo's face. It's all about design. To me, that's really what it's about. Animation, you can do several different ways, but it's certainly cheaper to do CGI.
Well, and you see bad examples of CGI all the time now, because everyone's trying to get the lowest bid. And you see something like the RoboCop remake, where there's a whole scene where they have RoboCop fight 3 Ed 209s in that movie, and everyone's jumping around and doing flips, and there's no sense of weight to anything, or it's just and RoboCop in that is just completely in black, and he's fighting these black robots, and you're just like, I don't know what I'm watching. It's, and I love practical effects. I love, there's directors out there like Guillermo del Toro is really good at blending CGI and practical, and still using monster makeups and stuff.
He's
like that.
He's a bigger Frankenstein fan than I am.
And he's working on a Frankenstein movie, right?
He is.
So I mean, like, I wish there was more. I don't know if it's. I'm not gonna say directors, but I will say studios that are open enough to blend the two. Like, use CGI as a great tool, but it's a tool, and let's use it in our toolbox, but let's not put away old stuff.
But you didn't ask this question, but I'm going to respond to it anyway. You do have to hold the director accountable, because a director who says, "Here's what I want to do," and the studio says, "You can't do that." That's when the director has to sort of stand or fall. Like, I'm gonna die on the slab for this particular thing. So you really have to blame them and applaud them for when it works. But studios, it's all about penny pinching, and one of the many fights you have in directing a movie is, this is going to cost this amount. But if it's something where it can only be this way, so I don't care how much it costs, so let's take the money from something else. But bad directors are the ones who just go, okay, no, we can't do it. Okay, I'll do it your way.
Right, you got to stick with your guns with what you love.
You do. I mean, and it can get awkward, it can get uncomfortable, but that's the job.
With the Predators, you wrote that with Shane Black. The Predator, excuse me. You wrote that with Shane Black.
I did, yes.
How much of the what you turned in was used in the film? Was it?
Well, everything was written by me and Shane.
Yeah.
There's nothing in there that was written by anybody else, except maybe the very, very end. Might have been an ad lib by the actor, but no, we wrote it all together.
And how was that experience? How did they approach you to? Did they approach both of you to redo another Predator movie, or was that?
Well, they approached Shane initially because he was actually in the first movie, and after Iron Man 3 was a sought after director, and I think they thought it would be a nice sort of like coming home.
Sure.
Like, let's now that you're a director, come back and play in the sandbox that you were in at the very beginning.
Yeah.
And then he very kindly, we had done a Western for Amazon, a pilot that was really cool that we had a lot of fun with that we shot in New Mexico, and so we were kind of on a roll. We hadn't written together in years, I think, since Shadow Company, and so we had fun. And he said, "Hey, do you want to do this Predator movie?" And I said, "Sure, great." And so we wrote it together, and it is what it is.
Did you always want to work on a Predator film, or
No?
Oh, okay. You just
No, I think the first one's terrific and one and done.
yeah. You never saw the rest of them at all, or
I saw 2.
yeah.
And I saw the Robert Rodriguez one.
Okay.
Predators,
Yeah, Predators. Yeah.
I just think there's limited entertainment from the Predators, personally.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is there any other sci-fi movie that you would want to take on at all?
Oh, that's a great question. Wish you'd asked me before we started, so I could have think of something.
That's okay. Yeah. They offered you anything. What would you want?
In the science fiction realm,
Or anything, any fantasy, whatever it is. If a studio said carte blanche to do whatever you want, what would it be?
the great unmade Dekker film, I made a deal to make after Monster Squad. And had Monster Squad been a gigantic hit, I would have made the Johnny Quest movie.
Oh, wow.
I wrote the script. It's
Yeah.
my favorite script.
Live action?
Yep. It's my favorite script, and it's everything you could possibly imagine it to be. All the stuff from the main titles are in the plot of the movie.
Wow.
And it has a heart and a soul. It could have been my greatest film.
Yeah, and is that still something that you're trying to make happen at all, or?
No, I haven't touched it in years. I mean, a lot of this stuff is corporate. You know, we talk about Warner Brothers and Sony, and now they're sort of cross collateralizing, so that it's like, well, who owns this, and there's no identity in Hollywood anymore. It's all about the money. People care more about the money than having a shingle that means something. You know, it used to be the Universal logo would come up, and you'd go, "Oh, here comes something exciting," or Warner Brothers or whatever it is, and it's not that way anymore. I don't know who owns Johnny Quest. I think it was Warner Brothers, but
Yeah, I'm not sure if they do, but I think
Is that through Hanna-Barbera, though? or-
Hanna-Barbera is the studio, but I don't know who
Yeah.
owns Hanna-Barbera.
I think I thought Cartoon
Warner
Network
Brothers.
picked up a lot of Hanna-Barbera's
Yeah.
catalog.
but that's not. They show it, but they don't own it.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, that's true. Yeah, I'm not sure who owns it.
Do you have a currently or actors in general that you have in mind for that movie?
No, and I never even thought of them really, because I think that those characters mean so much to me as who they are.
Yeah.
That it's a little bit like Tom Atkins in Night of the Creeps. I would want to meet actors. There's a term in Hollywood you've heard called starfucker,
Yeah.
and I'm not interested in like working with a big name actor because it's a big name actor.
Yeah,
I'm interested in working with great actors, whether they're big names or not. And with that one, it would really be a matter of finding a casting director, and we talk about who is this, what do they need to look like, what do they need to act like, what's their attitude, and then having actors come in and go, that's Ray Spanna.
Yeah. What do you think about the state of Hollywood right now in general?
I think you can tell I've got some issues with it.
Yeah. Yeah, I just thought I'd ask directly. I mean, do you think it's ever going to, I don't come back, whatever, lack of a better term, come back or have another moment like we had in the 80s and 90s with these amazing movies being made year after year?
I think that the powers that be would have to adjust their thinking, and there would have to be a better litmus test for who's in charge. Because I feel like now the people who are in charge don't love movies. And if you have people who, and like in the 30s and 40s, you know, those old guys, they loved what they were doing.
Right.
Yeah.
And now it's kind of like when it becomes a business where it's all about the bottom line, get out of the business and find another one where you can make more money but not ruin our dreams.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's basically how we talk about that a lot on this
Yeah.
podcast.
Yeah.
Those exact
Pretty
sentiments.
much.
Yeah. Are the things that we loved growing up, Star Wars, and you know, are just we're not really sure where they're at right now, unfortunately.
It does feel like there's a lot of other people making decisions other than the artist in charge.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Exactly.
Well, greed is a problem.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't begrudge somebody for wanting to sell what they've created and make a lot of money on it. But you know, by the time George Lucas sold Star Wars to Disney, we already are invested in it.
Mm-hmm.
So he's selling something he owns, but it's something that we're invested in.
Yeah.
And I think, and I'm not pointing my finger at him particularly, but anybody who owns intellectual property and then just sells it for the top dollar, who isn't thinking about how is this going to affect the people who love it, that really rubs me the wrong way.
Right. Well, Monster Squad is still out there, and we still love it.
Yep.
And
RoboCop 3 is out there, and we love it.
And we love it. Yeah.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah, because it's, and again, I'll say it again. I don't care. RoboCop 3 is a great film. Monster Squad is a great film. Completely influential to my life as a young kid, and it's just it really ignited a love of writing in me, particularly Monster Squad.
That means a lot to me. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Before we wrap up, I would assume that's what we're doing. But I did want to just bring up. I did read that you were a comic book fan, and I was kind of interested in like what were you? Was it more superhero or was it the old sci-fi like comic?
I was a big Marvel fan in the in the heyday when Jack Kirby and Jim Steranko and all those guys were drawing and and Stan the Man was writing. I mean, I really loved that stuff. But now, you know, obviously that's been taken and and they're doing it plenty.
Yeah, yeah. Very much so.
Well, Fred, we've taken up almost 2 hours of your time. Thank you so much for coming on. We really appreciate it. Thank you for the work that you've done, for having a massive influence on us as kids. I mean, it's everything that you guys did in the 80s and 90s, we were raised on.
Yeah.
And it continues to influence our lives to this day.
Basically, you have to adopt us now.
Basically,
It's what this comes down to.
Exactly.
You're our stepdad.
And it's like I said before, it was a lot of our moral compass for us growing up. And yeah, I want to be the good guy. I don't want to be the bad guy because they don't succeed. And the good guys win. And,
hold on to that, man.
Yeah,
hold on to it.
We've been holding on to it we're all I'm 41. They're almost 40, and that's what's been our guiding principle since we were kids. Thanks to movies like that you made. So
well, not just because you said that very nice speech, but this has been one of the most enjoyable, greatest interviews I've done. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
You guys are great.
Thank you. And we have stuff here in front of us, and we were wondering if you'd sign it for us because we're nerds and we're so sorry to ask.
Yeah,
happy to. Absolutely.
Wait, Chad, put your pants back on. Oh God!
Oh no!
Oh, we were doing so well.
Was there anything you wanted to like promote or push or like something you're working on?
Can't talk about it.
Oh,
awesome!
Ooh,
fair enough.
Outstanding.
Now
That's good news.
Okay.
Enticing.
All the mics are off now. We can talk about it right now.
Take us out, Chad.
All right. Thank you all for listening to another episode of Enter the Nerdom. It's been a blast with Fred Dekker here, and I hope you all who were listening enjoyed it just as much as we enjoyed talking to him. And yes, as we usually always say, enter the Nerdom, exit the Dekkerverse.
And watch Monster Squad. Watch Night of the Creeps. RoboCop 3 is a great movie. If you don't like it, fuck you. I'm sorry.
It's Miller time.
Yeah. Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.